Hello, today we are going to finish section 8.6. We are going to be solving equations by factoring again, but in this lesson we're going to be factoring trinomials, 3 terms. Remember that the zero product property gets used to solve equations once we factor. When we have 2 items that are multiplied to equal 0, one of those 2 items must be 0. And also remember that typically quadratic second-degree equations have 2 answers. When we solve an equation by factoring, we're still going to take all of our terms, move them to one side of the equation so that the equation equals 0. It's especially important in this lesson that you write your quadratics in standard form or descending order. So the squared term goes first, then the plain old x, and then your constant or your number. Then we're going to factor our trinomials, set each factor equal to 0, and solve. When you take a look at the first example on your paper, it says solve each equation. In question number 1, we have all of our terms on one side of the equation equal to 0. They're also in descending order, x squared minus 4x plus 3. So we're going to factor the left side. We can write our 2 parentheses. X goes at the beginning of each parenthesis. Then we look for the 2 numbers that multiply to 3, but add to -4. The only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. To get them to add to -4, we have to make both numbers negative. So this factors into x minus 1 and x minus 3. Then we're going to set each factor equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0, and solve each equation. So x might equal 1, or x might equal 3. These are our final answers. In question number 2, again, we have all of our terms on one side of the equation. They are in descending order, y squared minus 5y plus 4. So we can factor, make the 2 parentheses. Y goes at the beginning of each. Then we need 2 numbers that multiply to 4, but add to -5. 4 has 2 sets of factors, 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. The pair that I can get to add to -5 is 1 and 4. And I can do that by making both of them negative. -1 times -4 is 4. -1 plus -4 is -5. So our factors become y minus 1 and y minus 4. Now that we've factored, we have 2 items multiplied to equal 0. So we set each item equal to 0 and solve. The first equation says y could equal 1. And when we add 4 to the second equation, y might equal 4. In question number 3, we do not have all of our terms on one side of the equation. So first we're going to need to do some rearranging. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides, and at the same time, subtract 2 from both sides. When I write my terms, I'm making sure they're in descending order. So first I have x squared, then minus x minus 2 equals, everything on the right side of the equation canceled, so we just have 0. Now I can factor, make the 2 parentheses. X goes at the beginning of each. Then I need to figure out 2 numbers that multiply to -2, but add to -1. Remember, even though we don't see it, we know that there's a 1 in front of this x. The only numbers that multiply to 2 are 1 and 2. To get them to multiply to -2 and add to -1, we make the 2 negative. So our factors become x plus 1 and x minus 2. Now that we'd factor, we split, set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 1 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. And solve. When we subtract 1 from the first equation, x might equal negative 1. And when we add 2 to the second equation, x equals positive 2. In number 4, again, we need to rearrange our terms before we can factor. Let's bring 5 over to the left by subtracting it. This gives us x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. We have our terms in descending order equal to 0, so we can factor. Create the two parentheses. X goes at the beginning of each. Then we find two numbers that multiply to negative 5 and add to negative 4. 5 is prime, so its only factors are 1 and 5. To get them to multiply to negative 5 and add to negative 4, we make the 5 negative. So our factors become x plus 1 and x minus 5. Now that we've factored, split, x plus 1 might equal 0, or x minus 5 might equal 0. The first equation says x equals negative 1. And when we add 5 to the second equation, we get x equals 5. Tonight, you're completing the homework underneath of these example problems. For full credit, you need to show all of your work